It is my great pleasure to invite back to Unity Spiritual Center. I consider a soul friend. You've been here a few times now, Rabbi Kaplan. And we feel blessed. Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan is Director of International Religious Studies at the Vancouver School of Theology. She has studied Kabbalah with leading luminaries and Ayurvedic yoga at the New Life Center in Boston. And she has a gift for teaching with clarity and making the complex easy to understand. That's why we assume this is why the Carnegie Foundation named her U.S. Professor of the Year in 1991. Please join us in welcoming Rabbi Laura Kaplan.
Thanks. Thank you, Janet. And thank you, Janet and musicians, for bringing us to peace. And thank you, everyone, for welcoming me and welcoming each other. The title that Randy and I co-created for this talk is Kabbalah Wisdom, Hidden in Plain Sight. Kabbalah, as you know, is a Hebrew word that means receiving. It refers to a received tradition passed from teacher to student. And while we certainly have many books of Kabbalah, there is an esoteric aspect that cannot be learned from any book. But it comes from a mixing of the teachings with your own life experience. And of course, you know that the word wisdom hints at that very same process. Wisdom is not a matter of acquiring knowledge. Wisdom is a certain vision or perspective one gains by living and learning. 2 weeks ago, I also spoke about the Kabbalistic teaching that all of creation is a garment for the divine. Everything that exists clothes spirit. It both conceals it and reveals it. So I will be expanding on those themes today. I'll be talking a little bit about a Kabbalistic way of perceiving reality, and a little bit about some of the techniques that our tradition and I personally recommend for developing that kind of spiritual perception, that kind of insight and wisdom. One of my personal favorite techniques for working on spiritual perception is taking public transit. Because on public transit, I see really amazing things happen. One morning, just a few years ago, I was standing at the corner of Fraser and King Ed at the bus stop, waiting for the 8. The 8 usually comes pretty regularly, but for some reason, this morning it was delayed. The bus stop is in front of a gas station convenience store. And at that time, just about 2 years ago, for some unknown reason, the old phone booth was still on the property. I'm standing alone at the bus stop in front of the convenience store, and through the hum of the traffic, I gradually become aware of a human voice screaming curses. And I look around for it, and I see that a young man is standing at the phone booth, on the phone, and he's yelling into the phone. And what he's yelling is not very nice. And I imagine that at the other end of the phone, there's a really soothing voice, and they're reasoning with him, and they're consoling him, and that soon he's going to quiet down, and he's going to begin to talk about what made him so upset. But I'm wrong, and he continues screaming curses as loud as he can. And then I think, soon the person on the other end of the phone is going to hang up on him. And then he is going to take his rage out on the nearest living thing, which would be me, the only other person on that street corner. And I'm a little afraid, but I grew up in New York City during the wild 1960s and 1970s, before the famed Giuliani law enforcement era. And I'm not going to let just one crazy person scare me away, and I need to get on that bus. So I just hold steady, and I listen, and the stream of curses continues. And suddenly, I get it. There is no one on the other end of that phone call. And then the young man raises his voice even louder, and he screams, "This isn't about me. This is about God." And then I really get it. The young man isn't at a phone booth. He's at a prayer booth. For him, you put in your quarter, or whatever the phone was costing at that time, you put in your quarter, and you access another dimension of reality. And of course, it was still a phone booth, but it was also a prayer booth. It had both of those functions, and this prayer booth seemed to be working pretty well for this young man, because he kept on praying at the top of his lungs. The phone booth for him was a kind of magical object. And there's an ancient Jewish text that reminds us that magical objects are everywhere. We just need to turn our attention toward them. This text is not primarily a Kabbalistic text. It's more a text of wisdom literature that tells you how a wise person conducts their daily affairs. The text is called Pirkei Avot. It's about 1,800 years old. The name Pirkei Avot is usually translated as Ethics of the Fathers, but a more accurate translation would be Foundational Principles. This text tells us that magical things are part of our world, and they were intentionally put there by the divine to get our attention. And here is how the authors of Pirkei Avot put this teaching in their own religious and biblical language. They're very familiar with the creation story in the first chapter of the book of Genesis, in which creation is portrayed as extremely orderly. There's a pattern to everything. God says, let something come into being. It does. God sees that it's good. The day ends. We're on to the next day. And things are created in an order of interdependence. Every new thing requires the thing before it in order to exist. So there's a clear pattern and there's a clear order. Even though Genesis isn't a scientific text, there's a great appreciation for laws of nature. And that, according to the book of Genesis, is the world that God, envisioned as a creator, placed us in. But if you keep reading on a little more in the Hebrew Bible, you'll see things are not so orderly. And there are all kinds of events and objects that seem not to have a place in that very orderly creation. For example, the mouth of the talking donkey that talks to the prophet Balaam. The rainbow of eternal promise that appears to Noah and family. The magic staff that Moses uses to split the Red Sea. How did all of those things that don't really fit the scientific order get there? Where are they in the Genesis account? And the authors of Pirkei Avot decide these are all the things that God created at twilight on the sixth day. They didn't get there in time for the account of day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But they were very definitely put there by the divine, and they were put there at a time of twilight, when the light mixes with the dark, when a transition is happening in the very atmosphere around us. If you've ever driven at twilight, particularly on a dark country road, you will remember that you see kind of strange, shadowy figures that may or may not be there. It's a time to drive with great attention. Metaphorically, the authors of Pirkei Avot say, all those magical things exist, but we can only see them at the twilight regions of our consciousness. When we are at those times of open receptivity, where one way of feeling into the world, one way of looking into the world blends with another, that's when we can see those magical objects and experiences. And they are put there deliberately by Spirit to get our attention so that we look harder and look deeper and look at things a little bit differently. The Jewish philosopher, 20th century, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was very grounded in the Hasidic wing of Kabbalistic teaching, Rabbi Dr. Professor Heschel suggested that we need to live with what he called an attitude of radical amazement all of the time. And he defines, sort of, what he means by radical amazement, because you can't be that precise when you're defining amazement. Amazement is about overflowing boundaries. And Heschel says, when we look at the world, we should recognize that words and things point beyond themselves. That sounds simple, but it's really profound. Everything that exists and is accessible to our perception also points to something beyond ourselves and beyond that world that's accessible through regular perception. Everything is both itself and a hint to something else. And in some ways, we're all familiar with this way of looking at reality. So when we see a swallow flying high in the sky, or a school of swallows. Sure, the swallows are both themselves, and they're also a reminder of the human desire to fly freely and creatively. If we've been lucky enough to have a supportive mother, we know that the supportive mother is both a wonder in herself and a concrete expression of divine love. Or a tree. A tree is both itself in all its wonder, and it's a spiritual inspiration reminding us that if we root ourselves and we reach up, we will bear fruit. When you look at the world with an attitude of radical amazement, everything is both itself and a metaphor for something else, redirecting our perception. And if you want to see the world as a Kabbalist sees the world, you'll begin to cultivate this type of metaphorical perception, also known as radical amazement. And when people are studying Kabbalah in a Jewish setting, a culturally and intellectually Jewish setting, we practice this multi-leveled way of seeing through a kind of Kabbalistic Torah study, a Kabbalistic Bible study. We practice seeing multiple meanings in the text. Whatever passage we are studying, we look for at least 4 different levels of meaning. And we have Hebrew names for them. We call the first level Peshat, the simple storyline or ethical content of a passage. We call the second level Drash, exposition. We look at the main point in a kind of future tense, assuming it's going to have something to teach us about our personal way of being in the world. We look for a remez, an allegory, the way an aspect of the story is a metaphor for something else. And finally, we look for the sod, the secret teaching about the nature of divinity. For example, looking at the story of Jacob's dream, a young man who is hoping to find his way in the world and begin to make his own fortune as an adult, lies down in the great outdoors and has a dream that right near him there's a ladder reaching from the ground up to the heavens, and angels are walking down and up that ladder. And he realizes, God is in this place, and I did not know it. We can look at Jacob's dream in this fourfold way. Level 1, the simple story. It's the story about a young man looking for guidance at a particular time of transition in his life. And he has a dream that uses symbols of transition. And somehow, we don't know exactly what he gleans that unfolds over his life, but somehow he feels supported by the universe in this transition. The future tense, the drash, the teaching for all human life in the future, reminds us that when we dream, we too are climbing a ladder into the heavens. Any one of us at any time can have a dream when we need guidance, and we can receive it. We don't know how it will manifest in each individual life, but we see here a teaching about something we can expect to be revealed to us as a gift in the future. The allegorical level. Sure, the dream shows a literal ladder with something that looks to Jacob like angels going up and down it. Maybe they've got wings. Who knows how Jacob imagines an angel? But the ladder isn't a literal ladder at all. It's also a psycho-spiritual ladder. A ladder where each rung is a different spiritual quality, a different level of spiritual development. And that metaphorical ladder exists within each of us, and we can understand our lives as a walk up a ladder like the one in Jacob's dream that will take us metaphorically from lower levels of understanding, the earthly, up to higher levels that might be called the heavenly. And finally, the secret about the divine nature. Jacob's dream shows us that divinity is present on every rung of that ladder. Every level of consciousness is a portal to feeling, seeing, understanding, being touched by spirit. Both those times when we feel so elevated to the highest peace after a deep meditation like today's, and both those times when we feel so constricted that everyone can tell we're desperately in need of meditation. Divinity is present at every level. This is just one example of how through Torah study, through Bible study, when we're studying Kabbalah in a Jewish context, we train ourselves to look at the world through an attitude of radical amazement, seeing multiple levels of reality and understanding in every phenomenon that we encounter. This fourfold Torah study is a way of training us to learn to see from the twilight edges of our consciousness. And you could simply call it training of the imagination, as long as you understand that imagination isn't simply the making up of things that don't exist, but imagination is also a kind of seeing of hidden dimensions and possibilities that could be brought forward into the center of consciousness. Let me tell you one other amazing thing that I saw on the bus more recently. I'm on the bus near Commercial Drive, and we're stopped at a red light at a pedestrian-controlled crosswalk. The pedestrians are crossing, of course. One young man is crossing, and he stops right in the middle of the street. And he looks at the walk sign, and you can hear him loudly counting down with the walk sign. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And after it reaches 1, he dashes across the street to the corner. And then he pushes the button to do it again. I left out one part. He crosses, he cheers for himself, and then he pushes the button. It couldn't be clearer what he's doing. I thought that was a walk sign to help you cross the street. He thought it was a sprint training machine that the city had just so kindly placed there for his use. Who knows how many things in life are actually put there to train us in deeper, more creative, more spiritual perception. Who knows how many things are just waiting at that twilight edge of our consciousness for us to discover. Thank you.